You're listening to Just Believe, sponsored by Just Believe Recovery Centers, with your host, Brenda Swift, as she discusses all aspects of addiction, recovery, and sober living. And now, your host of Just Believe, Brenda Swift.
Hi, welcome to Just Believe Radio. I am your host, Brenda, and we are here on 900 AM, the Talk of the Palm Beaches, Monday through Saturday at 3 p.m. We are talking about addiction and recovery and the solutions that you can find that can make a difference in anyone you know that has a problem or somebody that feels they might need help now. We do have a helpline, and that number is 877-309-3635. And I am blessed to have two guests back in the studio today that have been on a previous show that are with the Stopp Now organization, and they are working very hard to start to regulate the mass volumes of painkillers that are causing a huge part of the epidemic that's actually going on and causing so many deaths as a result of the addiction. Welcome back to the show, Janet and Maureen.
Thank you.
And we went into a little bit about, on the last show, about the basics as far as where you're trying to make a difference. Now, how long has the organization been in existence?
A little over 5 years now.
Okay.
And when we first started, as I mentioned on your previous show, there was over 150 pain clinics just in Broward County. They were very blatant to what they were doing. They were advertising in the New Times 10 pages of pill mills. Dr. So-and-so has left. Come back, no questions asked. There was a taxi cab driving all through Palm Beach County with a banner that said, office visits $250, Roxy's $3.
Oh my gosh.
They weren't even trying to hide what they were doing. And I want to bring up one point, too, just to show you the amount of pills, because what is transition now? The pharmacies are being more careful. They're putting some of them limits on their own, what they can prescribe, because the DEA started, which DEA and law enforcement, I can't say enough good things about them. They are trying to do something about this. They're kind of out there by themselves sometimes, it seems. But so the pharmacies are telling some patients, no, they can't give them any more pills. And then the chronic patients are complaining to the senators, and this is who they're hearing from. Well, my point even to that, if they would get rid of these high-prescribing doctors that are giving these kids with nothing wrong with them 300 pills, there'd be plenty out there. Because I just want to read this to you. In 1997, the amount of production was 8.3 tons of oxycodone. In 2011, 105 tons. In 2012, 114 tons of oxycodone is produced in this country. That's a 1,747% increase over the amount produced in 1996, the first year OxyContin came on the market.
That is phenomenal.
Do we need that many pills out there, and there aren't enough? Now, what's based on, because we spoke to the DEA in Washington, D.C., we had a meeting with them, and we said, we need you, because DEA approves the amount of production. And I said, we need less pills, not more. And it's based every year on the amount that was sold the year before. So
there's no end.
There's no end to it.
There's no end. Okay. So these are also, Maureen is here, and she is working on some of the legislation, being able to make some changes as far as at the level that you're talking about with the DEA and with changing, getting a way to be able to remove the licenses of those that are not acting in the best interest of human beings, right, as well as to be able to regulate some of, one of the things that I don't think a lot of people realize is they think of addiction as, the under the bridge, the came from an alcoholic home, all of these things that are the stigma of addiction, and a lot of people don't pay attention, thinking it doesn't apply to them. Mm-hmm. And the reality, I mentioned on a previous show that a woman that was bringing her daughter into a treatment center I worked at years ago said, the first indication I had that my son had a problem with OxyContin was when I walked into his room and he was dead. And that the fact that it can happen by people that have extra prescriptions laying around and don't think anything of it and never imagine that their children would get involved in it. Or, of course, at a parties, they have the pill parties where everybody's taking whatever they're handed and the kids aren't aware. So we're trying really hard to get the message out on a lot of different levels. These women are working very hard to make a difference. And you have the website information.
Yeah, we have a lot of information on the website and a lot of resources, and we just need people to reach out. Because if you figure 13.5 were dying, okay, and the CDC says 23% decrease in the state of Florida, and they're like bowing down to the state of Florida for a 23% decrease. Well, guess what? We still have 9 a day. Mm-hmm. Our problem is not over. We're still one of the highest prescribing states in the United States. And you look at the devastation of parents going to bury their children. You look at the devastation of how many kids, there's at least a couple thousand kids that are in our foster care program because their parents are gone. The strain on our society is tremendous. It's not just the person who got addicted. Families are being absolutely destroyed in trying to deal with addiction. In Broward County, there are no beds. When your child's ready for help, you're in a golden hour. You need to get help immediately when they ask. There's no beds. There's no beds anywhere to put these kids, and yet our physicians keep prescribing, and our governor-appointed medical boards approve of this substandard medical care of prescribing narcotics.
And some of these, most parents, I'd say every parent that I met was, as you said, a good home. These kids have come from good homes. Did they make a mistake? Yes. Have we ever made mistakes in our lives? But this one is deadly. And another mother that joined us early on, her daughter at age 17 had broke up with her boyfriend, and her girlfriend said, here, just take a quarter of this. Did she make a mistake in doing that? Yes, she did. But then she was walking into the pain clinics and saying, I fell off a horse, and then walking out with plenty. She is now one of those people that is living on the street. But back then, at age 17, you couldn't walk into Publix and buy a beer. Publix is very good about checking ID for everyone, but she was able to walk into this pill mill and walk out with a prescription for 300 oxycodone. What is wrong with this system?
That's Florida physicians.
And you are listening to Just Believe Radio. I'm your host, Brenda, and I have Maureen and Janet in the studio with the Stop Now organization, and that's STOPP now.com, and that stands for?
Stop the Organized Pill Pushers Now.
And you also have the biggest thing that I've seen on the Facebook page and the website is the protests that you're doing to start to try to make a difference. Can you give us some information about that?
Yes, this is going to be in Palm Beach County. We are trying to get a meeting with the Surgeon General to help us out. I would like the Board of Medicine to be audited every 6 months on what their outcome was for a high prescribing doctor that came before them. We've been at meetings, Maureen more than I, but they're usually fined about $12,000. If you have a doctor that's making $500,000 a year, that is not an incentive to stop. So we need a lot of people out there with us so I can get this meeting. I would like the audit to be done by the drug court judges, because standing before them every day are the results of this inaction by the Board of Medicine. Please join us. It's Friday, April 10th from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. It's at the Doubletree by Hilton, 100 Fairway Drive, Deerfield Beach, Florida, and it is at the Florida Board of Medicine meeting. Please, please come out and join us.
And for anyone that does want to come out and join, what exactly would they be doing? It's a peaceful protest.
It is a peaceful protest. We have signs, we have flags, we have banners. You can make your own if you like. It's from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. We have never had any problem at these peaceful protests. People were saying when we were out there, you're going to get killed doing this. They're with organized crime when we're in front of the pill mills. But honestly, we have never had one problem. And
The police officers really love to see us out there because they're at their limits. They can't we cannot arrest ourselves our way out of this problem. It is a regulation. It is regulatory. It is up to the physicians. They started this problem. They need to fix it.
Absolutely. And we are going to take a quick break and be back and talk more about the protest and other things that you can do to help end opiates and painkillers. We'll be right back.
Welcome back to Just Believe, sponsored by Just Believe Recovery Centers, with your host, Brenda Swift, as she discusses all aspects of addiction, recovery, and sober living. Now, back to your host, Brenda Swift.
Welcome back to Just Believe Radio. I am your host, Brenda, and we have Janet and Maureen back in the studio today talking about being able to make a difference. And a lot of people have heard bits and pieces about how the prescription drugs are being prescribed at volumes, and the deaths that are associated with those make the news, and a lot of people don't realize that it applies to them as well. And I think unless you've had any experience or know somebody that has lost somebody or had a family member addicted, they don't really grasp that this is affecting every single economic level, every single class of people. And we're talking about that the stigma, the original stigma that everybody looks at as addicts being growing up in alcoholic homes or drug addicted parents and under the bridge, and that isn't what we're looking at
No,
anymore.
it isn't. Today's face of an addict is not what you think about. And everybody's like, oh, well, they can make a choice. It's their choice that they're using. Well, you know what? Substance abuse is a choice, okay? Addiction is a disease, okay? There's kids, most kids are going to experiment, and some kids will not survive that one experiment because that ignites the disease in their brain. They have a reward deficiency syndrome. Their opioid receptors are looking for more, and it's just devastating to watch, witness. Our society is it's just unfortunate. There's no beds when kids want help. There's no help from the physician community.
Of course not. Now, one of the things that, for those that aren't familiar with how addiction works, and that we do call it a disease, is there is a gene that has been located in that actually combines with, once opiates are in somebody's system, you don't have to have any prior history of anything, and what it triggers is a response that craves more. And it becomes a huge, huge issue very quickly. Mm-hmm. I mean, from the very, very first use, it can actually trigger addiction in families that have not had a prior history of addiction. And a lot of people believe that, my son, my daughter can't possibly have an addiction problem. And if they did, if they ever had a problem, they would tell me. Well, once that is triggered and they're off and running, they're no longer the person that you actually recognize or actually work with the same moral structure and the same personality. It's it's insidious in the way that it
is. It's an insidious disease, and the worst things that are happening right now is parents saying, "Not my child."
Mm-hmm. Yes, exactly.
With the numbers out there, guess what? It is your child. I remember some back in the day. Everybody's like, "Oh, my son wouldn't do that. My son wouldn't do that." I'm like, "Your son was at the same party as my son. Really? Mm-hmm. Is that really what you think?" Okay, that denial in the parenting community is allowing this disease to proliferate.
Definitely. And education and awareness is the biggest thing that we're trying to do on Just Believe Radio, and be able to put the message out that this can affect your child. Most everybody at this point knows someone or has heard a story of the devastation. I know that I had heard that overdose deaths in the country have exceeded that of vehicle accidents.
It is the number one cause of death now in our country. And they're not all just, as I said before, the joyride. Some of them came about this addiction very honestly. It's the same chemical component as heroin. It goes to the same receptor site in the brain as heroin. And It's just overpowering to them. And the pharmaceutical companies have the added bonus that, oh, well, they're a drug addict. And they're paying doctors to write medical textbooks. The state of Virginia sued them and got $634.5 million. That was in 2004, if I'm correct, but I believe that's the year. Because in the textbooks, they were writing about the under treatment of pain in America and how this drug is non-addictive. That's how they were marketing it. And that is incorrect. Where is our Surgeon General? They spoke out years ago about the tobacco and how bad that is. They're not saying one word about the opiates. They're killing 16,000 a year in our country. Not a word.
And we have 100 million now chronic pain patients in the United States. Well, of course we do. We consume 80% of the entire world's opioids. So of course we have 100 million. But are they really, truly chronic pain patients? Okay, or are they narcotic dependent?
And that's the difficult part, is that as you spoke about on the previous show, they start at a dentist can prescribe Percocet, anything that starts the ball rolling. These are, they're not people going out and looking for drugs or even hanging out at a party and making a wrong choice. These are post-op patients that had surgery or an injury, or somebody that has a wisdom tooth out that can actually trigger this reaction in their brain that is part of the disease. And I don't believe most people are aware of that.
Part of the education, too, I want to let parents know that many of them, of course, are grieving parents, and it's very hard as they're cleaning out their child's room to save things. But if you get in touch with us and let us know what doctor was prescribing to your child, we will get that information to the DEA and try to go after that doctor. So don't throw that away. Also, we have the Good Sam law in Florida, Good Samaritan law. If your child, as we say, this is a hard one to educate because you don't want to admit your child would be doing anything like this, but if they're with someone and there is an overdose, call 911. Get that kid the help that's laying on the floor not breathing. They might be able to save his life, and there would be no arrest for anything that's found at that scene. So let them know that. Get that kid some help.
And you are listening to Just Believe Radio. I am your host, Brenda. We do have a helpline for anyone that wants information on anything they hear here or for themselves or a loved one struggling with addiction, and that number is 877-309-3635. And you do have a protest that's coming up very quickly that's important for people to get involved with. Is that right?
That is April 10th. It's a peaceful protest. We have never had any problems at a protest. YPR is joining us, Young People in Recovery, and TAM is joining us, the addict's mom, as well as Stopp Now sponsoring this. It's 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. Friday, April 10th at the Doubletree by Hilton. The Board of Medicine is having a meeting there. The Board of Medicine could have prevented this from ever happening, and they can stop it now. So we need a loud voice out there that they will do something about this. I also have, we'll be there from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. Please join us. That's very important. Please call your legislators. Get involved. We can't be the only ones on the phone calling them. They get tired of hearing from us. And much more, they're hearing, like I said from before in the earlier broadcast, from the chronic pain patients. They need to hear from you. They need to hear your story about how your child is suffering, how you don't recognize the child anymore. As you said, many mothers have said they're writing checks. I go to my checks bounce because they've been writing checks. They're stealing their jewelry. These children would never have done that before. It's not your child anymore. It's something else.
Yes.
Yeah.
And we need to establish urgency into this equation.
Yes.
Urgency. How many patients died of Ebola? 1. And look what our country spent. And today, every 19 minutes, someone will die every 19 minutes. And what is our country doing? That's 120 a day. Man-made, physician-prescribed, fatal poisonings. Okay, where is our country? What are we doing? Where's the urgency?
Absolutely. And we talked on the previous show about that this can happen very innocently, and they can go to a dentist or a doctor, and after the initial surgery or the injury has been taken care of at the standard doctor's level, they're then referred to a pain clinic. And the pain clinic will, quote unquote, monitor how much pain medication is needed. And they, of course, take into consideration that a tolerance gets built up. So they continue to give these patients more and more drugs without their long past the time that the injury is healed.
Right.
And long past any studies that prove efficacy of long-term opioids. The studies were never done, okay? This OxyContin was approved, patented for malignant pain, okay? Now we're all pretty much off-label, low back pain, headaches, okay? Those studies have never been done to prove its effectiveness, okay? And then studies are coming out now that guess what? It doesn't work. Long-term opioids do not work in the majority of patients. Alternative modalities and therapies must be implemented. Unfortunately, that takes a lot of time, and the physician generally doesn't get paid for that.
Exactly. And what the protests right now are about are to try to stop those that are not complying with the things that have been put in place to help start to regulate, start to regulate some of the major. They're essentially doctors that have not complied or do not care what the amount of these medications they're prescribing is doing to people, and the people are dying. There is, as you mentioned on the previous show, there are things in place that help those doctors that do care to regulate and maintain, trying not to put the patient in a position where they're getting addicted and eventually buying prescriptions on the streets. But there are a number of them, especially in Florida, that are not complying with that. They have the option to.
Right.
We only have 12. They voluntarily can use this database. It's called eForce PDMP. 12% of our Florida physicians are using it.
And for those that aren't familiar, PDMP stands for?
The Prescription Drug Monitoring Database Program.
And that gives them the information whether they've gotten it.
It's a good tool if you take it out of the stigma of an addict. It's good for my mother who ends up in the ER because she tripped and fell, and she's on diabetic medication, she's on hypertensive, she's on this, that. Do I know the dosages? No. Does she know the dosage? Is she confused? Okay, well, maybe she went and was legitimately prescribed a Percocet, a Vicodin, or an OxyContin, okay, and she's having a reaction. How easy is it to just go to the database and look and see what that patient is on? In the meantime, she may have come in with slurred speech, and we're going to run, a stroke alert. We're going to spend 10 grand doing CAT scans and blah, blah, blah. And just look at it's good medical decision making for any physician for any and all patients.
And then part of the regulation that you've talked about is that they would be required to have to check that site and be able to get the information that's needed. And the protest we mentioned, they can find the information on the website.
Yes.
And that's STOPPnow.com and Facebook page. We'll also be posting information about all of your upcoming protests on our Just Believe Radio Facebook page and on our website as well. And you had mentioned how you actually started this organization was a story of a death of someone close to you. Is that right?
My friend, her son, he was visiting the pain clinic. Vincent Coangelo, he had visited his clinic the day before his death. Maureen mentioned him earlier. When Vincent Coangelo was arrested, he was making $150,000 a day. How much money do you need? So Blaine had an overdose. The hospital called her down. She found out about the pill mills, and the next day he had walked in front of a car on State Road 7 and was killed.
And those doctors still maintain the privilege to practice medicine in Florida.
Oh my gosh, it's just overwhelming, the insidious nature of how opiates work in the brain, and there's so many studies out there for anyone just hearing about this and really don't think that it could apply to themselves, their children especially.